brought an 8-ball to the hospital with me. So I have a feeding tube on one side of my nose, and I'm throwing away the urinalysis that they're giving me, and I'm putting water in it in the hospital. And I'm doing what blow I have left on the side of my nose that I still have access to in the hospital in between surgeries while they're trying to save my life. My wife is watching me become more and more, self-absorbed and selfish. I'm living in a little guest house that we have. I'm rarely coming around. And I remember at one point I said to her, at least I don't cheat on you. And it was such a punch in the stomach, because she said, I wish you would, if it would make you more available. I get home while the kids are still there. And it turns into one of those scenes that I remember when I was a little kid. I remember my young son saying, why do you have to be like this? Like screaming at me, leave her alone. And I'm telling my wife, you are not taking my children out of here. And I'm basically too drunk to stop her. And she leaves. And now I'm alone in my house. And I'm writing suicide notes.
Welcome back to the Seano Show. I'm your host, Seano McFarland. Today's guest is someone who knows a thing or two about rebuilding, literally and figuratively. Brad McCoy is a top real estate agent in Los Angeles now, but his journey here has been anything but easy. From battling addiction to losing his home in the LA fires, he's faced some of life's hardest resets. But his perspective on loss, recovery, and starting over is something you need to hear. Let's get into it. Brad, welcome to the show. Welcome back to Shell, your second home. Good to have you. Happy Sunday, man.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Seano.
Yeah, this is really special, man, huh?
Special place for me.
Huh?
It's a special place for me here.
Yeah, right? My God, man. This is good.
Yeah.
Because we got to go back a little bit. Let the folks know a little bit where you came from and kind of what you've been, your family history a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take it all the way back. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and was a little guy there, and born to an alcoholic father, and basically a whole family of alcoholics. I had what I always believed was a pretty garden variety life, or garden variety childhood, but wasn't so much that. Now that I think about it, it was just full of fear and violence and insecurity. But I was a precocious little kid. But my father died at 33 of cirrhosis of the liver. And I thought that was a sort of family legend. And then once I got into AA a little bit, I thought, is that even possible? So I had to Google it. And it is possible. You just have to be really, really good at it. And so he was 33 when he died.
How old were you?
I was 5 or 6 when he died. I actually thought he died when I was 3. So part of what happened, my mother and father divorced and remarried once, and then he disappeared. And so my grandparents told me he was dead. And the truth was, he just was out of my life at that point. And then, and so it was strange, to be a little kid. Someone asked me the other day if I have any memories of my father, and I really only have 2. I remember being chased through the house. Not that I ever remember being beat. I just remember how afraid of him I was. And then I remember being told, like little kids, to go say goodnight to your dad. And I went to say goodnight to him, and I was hugging him. And I just remember the stubble on his face and the smell of cigarettes and alcohol. I swore I would never be like my father. And we'll get to that.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah. So,
So you felt unsafe.
Yeah, very.
Unsafe.
I didn't have, truthfully, until I got in here and started doing work with you, I didn't have a vocabulary for stuff like this. I didn't know how much feeling unsafe can just hardwire you, can fuck you up in a lot of ways. And I felt very unsafe. And and there would be, I remember like violence was such a part of our family deal that I had two older brothers, both of whom have passed away now. I mean, this thing is the disease of alcoholism and addiction has just ripped through my family. I mean, they're all gone. And but I remember there was another family on our street 2 doors away, and I mean, we had family brawls, like full blown. And I'm a little kid standing on the porch, listening to like, my family cheer it on, like, get him, like, well, like hillbilly white trash, like whatever you can throw at it.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, that's what I had. And so, I sort of escaped into books and really fantasy in some ways. I remember walking home from school. Someone asked me one time if I went to church, and I said, yeah. They're like, was your family religious? I was like, no. Like, how did you find your way into any? And I go, I was walking home from school one day, like a little guy, like kindergarten, first grade, whatever. And I was walking past a church, and some lady was nice to me. And I felt, I realized the thing that I felt was safe. Like they had a Sunday school deal. They gave you snacks, but more than anything, there was no drama. And it was just, I felt safe. And I felt drawn to it because of that.
Kindness goes a long way.
Yeah, it does.
You had an angel that day. We talk about this on the show a lot, right? And
Yeah.
so, Brett, walk through grade school, high school, and kind of when you started chipping away a little bit.
It's funny. I used to ride my bike around neighborhoods when I was a little older, like 10, 11, 12, because I didn't have a curfew. I could just roam the streets. And I would stop at houses and look through the windows and see normal families having dinner. And I'd hear kids talk about getting put on restriction. And I used to like wish someone would put me on restriction. As crazy as it sounds, most kids they think their parents are assholes. Like, oh, my mom, I was like, I wish someone would put me on restriction. And I would ride my bike around like on any given evening. And I felt like that episode of Happy Days where Fonzie tells everybody like how much he's got going on Thanksgiving. It's either Thanksgiving or Christmas. And they're like, oh, wow, Fonzie's got it going on. And next thing you know, he's in the garage cracking open a can of tuna fish.
Right. Oh my God.
And so, but I stayed pretty busy.
What did you tell people when they asked you about your dad?
I used to say he was a general contractor because best I knew he was a laborer, like he laid pipe and stuff. And I certainly didn't talk about the drinking or the violence. And I just said he wasn't around. Or eventually I got around to saying he was dead. But then the other part of it was I never told anybody he died from being an alcoholic, because that seemed so shameful. And
did your mom make sure you didn't tell that story too? Was she like, Daddy just struggled? Or what was her thing?
What's funny is that my mom, I didn't know until right before she died that my dad had tried to be in AA. He was just one of the guys, revolving door.
Oh, that's
I had
right.
no idea. And I had no idea, like, because he just, I guess I forget how long this thing's been around. My mom was in Al-Anon, which I was shocked when she told me that. And
tell folks what Al-Anon's about.
So Al-Anon is really was like Lois Wilson started Al-Anon because all the men would be in there dealing with their drinking problems.
Lois Wilson is the wife.
Lois Wilson was Bill Wilson, founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, along with Dr. Bob's wife. And she started a program really for the families who were affected, who are left to clean up the wreckage and how to deal with. Well, there's 3 C's in Al-Anon, right? Like you learn that you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. Right. And it's funny, I was just having an exchange this morning with a friend about this because they were asking, what do we do? And I'm like, well, here's the good news and the bad news. There's really not much you can do. But for families who have to live with the disease, they need to know that. They need to understand that there's no shame in having an alcoholic. Like, you can do everything right, and you can still have the craziest alcoholic for a child or for a husband.
All right. So when did you start? Let's walk through when you start chipping away.
So when you say chipping away, you mean
when you start drinking?
Oh yeah. So that was always like a through line with my family. Like, everybody partied pretty hard. My mom was such a young mom. My mom had her first child, my oldest brother, when she was 17. So by the time she had me, she was 22 having her third child. So sometimes, it's funny, you think about the things your parents were doing. My mom was really young, and so even by the time I'm like 12, my mom's still really young. And I remember my friends would tell me that my mom was hot. And I thought it was so weird, but she was young, So she was just kind of out there doing her thing. And so she'd have crazy parties with people. There would be half drunk beers, margaritas, whatever around. And so by the time I was 12 years old, clearly was the first time that I smoked weed. Friend gets some weed and everybody's out of their mind. And turns out there was something called Sherm. There was PCP in it. And so everybody's just out there running by the time I'm 12. And my mom had no idea at that point because I had two older brothers that were kind of running and going, and a couple things about them. It never really stopped the way our family went. I turned out to be had decent hand-eye coordination. So I was a good baseball player, like little league baseball. But my brothers were so crazy that I was standing on a pitcher's mound at one point, and I hear like a helicopter, and I hear the whining of like a motorcycle, but it was a souped up moped, and the whole baseball field turns around, and it's my middle brother coming through center field being chased by a police helicopter with all these police cars chasing him. And he goes right through my baseball game, through this gate, down by a river, escapes and that kind of stuff.
That's a typical day at the McCoy family.
Typical day at the McCoy company, family. And that kind of stuff happened all the time, until he ended up in California Youth Authority. Anyway, so everybody partied. It wasn't my main thing yet until I got to be in junior high. And then like weed and, everybody would sneak into someone's garage, or someone knew there was alcohol. And I went straight from trying it to going into like blackouts, being found in bushes and vomiting. And, and that pretty much stayed like full on through high school. And then something happened when I was a junior where I had this crazy depression and I couldn't go to school. Like I should mention that when I was a sophomore, so by then I was about 14, maybe 15. Yeah, I was 15 years old. And my family, it was so violent in my house, and I never felt safe ever. I discovered at the end of high school, meth. And I spent about a year, because my oldest brother introduced me to meth. And I spent about a year, 6 months, like seriously doing meth. And I mean, it was the greatest thing I ever experienced. I mean, you don't have to sleep. I was a heavy kid, as we know. And what had happened just before my senior year is I played football. And so I had one of these experiences where I kind of went from a caterpillar to a little bit of a butterfly. Like when I went to this new school, I looked a lot better than I had in a long time. And so, the new guy thing lasted pretty well. Then when I found meth, I lost a bunch of weight and felt like, boy, that's just really great. But I got really, really strung out. And so my brother, who had gone to California Youth Authority, had gotten out of California Youth Authority and saw how strung out I was. And there's a lot about the violence in my family, but the one thing that I have to say is, like, I had a middle brother that really loved me. Like, he was gnarly physically. He could whoop anybody. Like, he was an MMA fighter before there was such a thing. And he would do anything, to protect me. And he goes, I want to go to Hawaii. You want to go? Let's go. And it was really his way of like getting me out of a scene that I was really caught up in. So we've got one-way plane tickets, packed bags, and we moved to Hawaii. And I got cut off. I had no supply when I got to Hawaii. And so I spent a year in Hawaii, drying out, trying new stuff, learning to surf, doing things like that. And then from there, my brother stayed for 7 more years. And then I I went, I got off the meth because I was there because I couldn't get it. And, I still drank. And then I moved back to California, moved to Santa Barbara, where I started at Santa Barbara City College. I started going to college, and then Merritt, who became my wife, she went to Westmont originally. And by the way, I fell in love with this girl the first time I saw her. But like most
Not hard
good,
to do.
like most good insecure boys like me, there was no way I was going to tell her how much I was smitten by her. So I kind of went out into the world and did my thing, and always had kind of alcohol. And like you hear in AA, fun with problems and then just problems. I hadn't even had the problems part of it yet. I mean, I just had that thing where I would get out of trouble. Like trouble would try to find me, and other people got in trouble. But I never really got in too much trouble then. We fast forward from there. By then, most of my friends were graduating from UCSB and getting jobs, and Merritt and I get engaged. And so she's finishing school. I'm still working for this guy. And one of my best friends graduates from UCSB, and he gets a job at Wells Fargo. And he goes, "This is perfect for you because it's this new group called the Business Banking Group." And I said, "Man, I haven't graduated from school yet, but I'm engaged now to be married to Merritt." We get engaged super fast. And because close the deal. And so he goes, no, just put your resume together, send it up here. And I do. And so I go up and I interview with Wells Fargo. This is on the Monterey Peninsula in Monterey. And I go up to interview, and Merritt and I get married in this 1992. We get married on June 20th. I better remember that date of 1992. We go off on our honeymoon. And on our honeymoon, I get offered a job from Wells Fargo. So really in the span of a couple of weeks, I get married. I get a job at Wells Fargo. We move up to Pacific Grove, which is, we're living right outside the 17-mile drive gate at Wells Fargo. And I'm basically hired for a commercial banking sales position. But one of my best friends is the most competitive person I've ever met in my life. And he and I we're so competitive with each other. We're in a brand new group, and we just get after it. And we go on this crazy run where we don't even know what we don't know, and we're willing to do whatever it takes. And we're advancing super fast in Wells Fargo. But all of a sudden we get in this group where they drink hard and they party. And I find that I'm really good at drinking and partying, and we performed well. And my career is advancing like crazy. And I keep getting promoted, and I'm trying to go back to school, and I'm not going back to school. And pretty soon I'm like the youngest guy in the room, and I'm the boss. I'm 29 years old. I'm the youngest senior vice president, division manager that the bank has ever had. And I feel like a complete imposter. And I'm thinking, that guy's got an MBA. That guy went to Harvard. That guy. And the faster my career is progressing. And I remember asking my boss, do you think that you're running in your career, are you running from something or towards something? And my boss looked at me like I was crazy, but I didn't really know the word imposter syndrome, the phrase imposter syndrome yet. I just didn't have the courage to say, like, I just feel totally like I was scared. Like I was afraid I was going to get found out, and that was incredibly motivating for a while. I kept having like these amazing things happening to me in that career, but I was still scared to death that I was going to get found out. And I even had people tell me, like, the road you're on, you're never going to have to work again. Your children won't have to work again. And I just didn't believe it, because I just didn't believe in myself enough that by the way, and I had situations at work where I would vomit down stairways, like from being too drunk the night before. I hadn't started drinking during the job. That came later. So I resigned from Wells Fargo. I got invited to join, to start a company, this tech company. It was really a venture capital fund. And I thought, this is the perfect opportunity to get out of here and kind of trade on who I believed I was before I got found out. And so I went out and we started a company. That company got acquired by a software company. And I'm only cutting two because this whole time I feel like I'm a fraud, and yet, I have a wife who loves me. But by the way, I never trusted my wife, and I never trusted anybody who loved me because I didn't believe, why would someone love me like I am? Just like I didn't want little kids to find out that I had a father who was dead from alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
And
you get married, you have kids, you're rising in the ranks.
Yeah.
You're partying. We got to get to your bottom and work our way through it. So, right. So let's talk to people about getting through some nasty stuff.
Yeah. So 2005, I rediscover one of my first loves, which is cocaine. This time it wasn't meth, because I really couldn't get it. And I start doing it, but I'm being very secretive about it. I'm drinking like crazy. And I'm going to get fired by this bank. And I resign and I start another company, because usually, when you've blown something up, you become an entrepreneur. And so I do that. And the great financial crisis happens by 2007. And I've done one thing in between, and that's also not working very well, largely because I've become a complete cocaine addict and an alcoholic by this point. I am living underground. This is all I'm doing. Nobody really knows it, except all they can probably see. I don't have many pictures of myself during that time. I'm sweaty all the time. I'm physically failing. I am spiritually decaying, but I'm running out of moves. I just don't know it yet. And so 2007, I start the process of starting a bank. The great financial crisis happens. So by 2009, nothing is working. We give back the money that we've raised to start the bank. And now I'm in such deep trouble that I don't know how to get out of this. I have children. My wife is watching me become more and more, self-absorbed and selfish. I'm living in a little guest house that we have. I'm rarely coming around. And I remember at one point I said to her, at least I don't cheat on you. And it was such a punch in the stomach, because she said, I wish you would, if it would make you more available to me and to us. And I was, and of course I'm a smart ass. And so I go, so you're saying it is okay if I get a girlfriend, and by the way, at that point, if you had seen me, it wasn't because of virtue that I wasn't really, acting out that much. It was lack of opportunity, because nobody really wanted much to do with me at that point.
Bloated, stinky.
Bloated, smell. Yeah. Oh, funny thing, because my wife said that she could always smell me. I smelled like diesel fuel and stuff. And I think it was because I had so much of the drugs and everything. I mean, we don't talk a lot about drugs, as I mentioned, because it really hurts my wife, because she felt like I really got over on her, because she just doesn't know the warning signs, because she was never a drug user. But by then I was developing something called, I had sores. I had sores coming out of my face. And this is going to be disgusting for a minute, but it's where you go. And so I end up in the hospital because I've lost the ability to swallow water. I can't get water down. I can't get food down. I have something called dysphagia. I go see an ENT friend who's a plastic surgeon. He puts an endoscope in my face, and he's like, man, you got a lot of scar tissue. And my wife is sitting with me. And so I think out of kindness to me, he's not saying, dude, what is going on with you? But he goes, I'm going to admit you, because not being able to drink water or eat is not consistent with life. And so he checks me into UCLA, and they determine that I have just my entire soft palate between my sinus cavity and my brain is covered in abscesses called retropharyngeal abscesses. And they're having to do microsurgeries to drain the pus that's happening. And by the way, they put a feeding tube in one side of my nose. And sorry, Merrick, she's about to hear this probably. And I brought an 8-ball to the hospital with me. So I have a feeding tube on one side of my nose, and I'm throwing away the urinalysis that they're giving me, and I'm putting water in it in the hospital. And I'm doing what blow I have left on the side of my nose that I still have access to in the hospital in between surgeries while they're trying to save my life. I've got arthritis so bad that all of my joints feel like glass, because I also have this they either call it viral or reactive arthritis. So I'm being told by friends who are visiting me, who are so kind, who are doctors in the hospital, like, you present, as they say, a very complicated case of symptoms, because I've got abscesses. I can't drink water or food. I can't swallow. I have arthritis. I'm just a mess. And so, they have me on IV fluids. They drain the abscesses. All of a sudden, I'm able to get a little bit of food down, but I'm well hydrated, and I start to look pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think, man, I look a lot better.
Okay.
So I take my gurney, and because I still have like fluids, IV fluids, and I've got a hospital gown on, and I go over to In-N-Out Burger across the parking lot at UCLA to see if I can get a little bit of an In-N-Out Burger down. And I look a lot better. And this is 2009. And I get out of the hospital, and I go right back to it. I think that my life has been saved. You would have thought that, and then I have this crazy car crash where I ripped 3 of the 4 wheels off my car, and I go right back to where I was. I'm not showing up for anything. My wife has just had it with me. I am now unemployed. I'm unemployable. And so I'm, interviewing for jobs. I am drinking like a complete fish. I have a cocaine dealer on speed dial, and I'm trying to trade on my reputation as a banker. And so at one point, and I've mentioned this before, I'm calling people that used to work for me, and I'm basically telling them to give me a job. And I say something to one of the guys who's now one of the heads of I'll just say the name of it's gone now, I think Union Bank. And he's like the guy running the bank. And he was a good friend. And I basically call him out, and I tell him, you owe me a job. And I say something very unkind to him. And I get a call from the head of security of Union Bank. And he says, you do know that he's one of the top executives of the entire bank, and we monitor all their communications. And I suggest to you, he goes, because you were his friend, he's given me permission to give you one warning. And if you make another phone call, we're going to prosecute you. And my ears were hot, and I'm so embarrassed. And essentially, all I do now is drinking, and it's just so bad that I say, well, I've known him a lot longer, and I'm just trying to get off the phone, and I'm embarrassed. So my last day before rehab, I interview for a job, and I get so blackout drunk that I can't find the place where I'm supposed to interview. And my wife asked me how the interview went, and I send her, at that point, there were texts by now. I send her a text that's unintelligible, and she sends me a message that says, I know you didn't go to your interview. Don't come home. I'm taking the kids, and basically you need to get your shit together. You need to figure something out. And at that point, I thought I was out of moves, because it's now early 2010. And I am, by the way, I'm broke. I am broken on every level, and my wife has just taken the kids. And so I go home that night, because she says, you can come home and get some stuff, but I won't be here when you get here, neither with the kids. I get home while the kids are still there. And it turns into one of those scenes that I remember when I was a little kid. I remember my young son saying, "Why do you have to be like this?" Like screaming at me, "Leave her alone." And I'm telling my wife, "You are not taking my children out of here." And I'm basically too drunk to stop her. And she leaves. And now I'm alone in my house. And I'm writing suicide notes. I take 2 pistols, I put them in a backpack, and I have a friend come by who had just gotten sober, and he stops by to see me, and I promise him that I'm not going to do any harm to myself. And he can tell, I think at that point, there's nothing he can do to really help me. And I just want him to leave. And he leaves. I take a backpack with 2 pistols, and I leave my wife a note. I leave my kids notes under their pillows. And by the way, I hadn't cried since I was 12 years old. So, I'm crying as I'm writing all this stuff. And I now know, looking back, that I'm crying out of self-pity. I'm crying because I'm pathetic. I'm not crying because I've loved.
You're surrender. Right.
Yeah. This is not surrender. And you would have thought the crashing cars and having the surgeries with the abscesses would have been enough. That having a situation and a scene that was so ugly with my wife, with my son yelling at me like when I was a little guy, that I swore I would never be like my father. And I remember that night looking in the mirror thinking, I am way worse than my father ever was. And so I end up down in Culver City in a hotel room with a plan. And through a series of events, I make the mistake because I turned my phone off. I thought I had turned my phone off, and I get a message because Merritt sees the note and she begs me. Oh, I think I turned my phone on right before, because I was committed, because I didn't know. I was out of money. I was out of moves. I just look back now and I think, God, I was still so selfish and pathetic that killing myself was my best plan, that I was going to leave Merritt holding the bag and my kids, with a legacy of a father who was such a failure, that he would leave them like that, and I had turned my phone on, and I got a text from my wife, who was on the ground, saying, "Please, don't do this. We can." She gave me another chance. So I took that chance, and she had found a rehab, because I get home like a giant baby, right? Like she's found a rehab, and I get to and I get home. She loads me in the car. She drives me up to Malibu. She spends money we don't have to put me in adult daycare, and I go to rehab. They put me on tons of anti-anxiety and drugs to make me feel good. And I think, I got this, this is going to be so, because I feel great. And at one point they take me off the antipsychotic medications, and I think, what has just happened? And I get a hold of the therapist there, and I say, something is seriously wrong. I felt great yesterday. Today, I don't want to get out of bed. And she goes, hang on. I interrupt her session, and she sits and she goes, hey, and she comes outside, and she's trying not to laugh, basically. And she says, I just checked your chart, and welcome back to reality. Welcome back to life. We've taken you off the anti-anxiety medications, and you're starting to feel like what's left, And what's funny about that is, right before they took me off the medication, I was so sure that I had this thing licked, and that the problem was my wife putting pressure on me, that I asked if they had a fax machine, and I had a photocopier, and I photocopied the chapter to wives in the big book, and I faxed it to my wife so that she would understand how to deal with me. So that, how to help her addict husband not feel so much pressure. And so I go to treatment. And by the way, I relapse in treatment, and I got 21 days, and I'm not sober. So I make it to 30 days. It was a mistake to get a day pass, by the way, because I went and spent a day with my family, and I got to go to my house, which was a terrible idea. And so I'm going home from rehab on day 30, and I stop at a liquor store in Malibu. My relapse, by the way, was on drugs. But so I stop at a liquor store in Malibu. I get a pint of vodka and I mix it with some cranberry juice, and I chug it on the way home. So now I'm, get my levels right. And I get home and my children are there, and who are young still, and my wife, and they have a ceremony for me. And they said, "We have something for you, Daddy." And they present me with these beautiful dog tags with my sobriety date, which was the date I went to rehab, and some really beautiful AA sayings and a chain. Beautiful that they had made at a jeweler and engraved for me with all their love and their names. And I just start crying. And the kids come over and they're hugging me, and it's a real family moment, where they're saying, "It's okay, Daddy, you're better now." And they don't know the reason that I'm bawling my eyes out is I'm such a piece of shit that I'm a fraud, and I don't have a sobriety date, and this is now 2010, and I'm back out there until 2012, August 30th of 2012, and if anybody knows what it feels like to take fake chips and fake cakes and do fake shares. And then I got a job, by the way. Shortly after I got out of rehab, I went to work for a bank that it was a really great job for me. I didn't deserve the job. And I did that job mostly in a blackout. And, and I walked into a conference room after being in that job for almost 2 years. And I hired everybody. I had a really good friend take a chance on me because I think he even knew about my incident with Union Bank Security, because that kind of got out there. But because I had just been to rehab, because a lot of people think rehab fixes you, and at best rehab opens up a crack so that sometimes people can get a spiritual experience that there's a shift inside of them. And so I walk into a conference room by the way, there was a person who worked for me during that 2 years who the HR person had a complaint that he always smelled like alcohol, because the guy looked like an alcoholic, that he got fired. And turns out the reason he got fired was I'm the one that smelled like alcohol all the time, because I would walk around with a bottle of grapefruit juice that was usually half grapefruit juice and half vodka. And I would I would stop at a liquor store at 6 o'clock in the morning to start my day. And I would leave one mixed in the trunk of my car, so that I was never out, And so I walk into a conference room after 2 years at this bank, and I flip off everybody, and I make obscene jokes. And it's a meeting that there's other people from the bank out from North Carolina, and my buddy finally called me, and he said, I warned you, man. One of these days you were just going to be too funny for your own good, and I'm going to have to let you go, and you can resign, and we'll give you a couple months. So I basically got fired, and I had traded on my last bit of career equity, if you want to call it that. And I still, by the way, didn't get the message, because I got fired in, that was probably February of 2012. I got a little bit of money, and I continued to try to interview with banks, because I thought, well, they'll learn. And by August of 2012, I had just one of those family meltdown events like you read about, where once again I had done it, and I bailed. I left my wife alone to, I would disappear at this point, even during then, and she sent me a message, or I went home, and she said, "I want to talk to you." And I got home, and she said, "I know you've been drinking. I know you still drink." She essentially called me on all my bullshit. And she said, essentially, I think because at rehab, they said they had recommended I go into sober living, and I didn't have time for that. I had a life to live. I had bills to pay. And they said, you need more time than this. And my wife said, I think you need to do what they suggested. And it was like the heavens opened up, because I thought there was no way I could, first of all, admit that I'd been drinking, even though it was so obvious. But she threw me a bone and she said, I want you to finish what they, if you don't, there is no us. And I took that moment and I went driving around looking for sober livings, and I pulled up at a sober living in Culver City. It was the only one that I could even think to afford. And it's called Herbert House. And I chugged a pint of vodka. I walked in to meet the intake person, and she asked me, when was the last time you had a drink? And I said, about 5 minutes ago in front of this place in my car. And she said, I thought so. I could smell it on you. And Seano, it was the first time that in real time I had been honest about who I was. It was the first time I realized I'd lost the power of choice over this. The gig is so completely up. And she let me said, okay, come back tomorrow. You can come back here. And I moved into that sober living. I was 44 years old. I was the oldest guy at the sober living. I, at that point, was willing to go to any lengths. And by the way, I used to go to meetings and stuff and share and cry about my work situation. I'd be wearing a suit. And I'm sure what people thought is that dude is so full of shit. But I go to this sober living and I'm ready, man. I'm making the bed. I'm mowing the lawn. I'm asking what I should do. I'm going to the Marina Center three times a day. I'm hearing the voice of angels come out of faces with tattoos all over them. And I found my people. I lived in the Palisades, but I was so focused and committed to fitting in and having the right answer that I was just so ready that, and then everybody in the sober living relapsed, because everyone was so in a hurry to get back to making a living. And I just, for the first time, was like ready to just be who I was and do the inventory and listen to suggestions. And I went to a meeting right when I got sober, and a friend who had watched me be so full of shit for 2.5 years while I was going to meetings, I was trying to tell him that I need to talk to somebody. And the guy didn't even let me get the question out because he knew me well enough. He tears a piece of paper, writes the phone number on it, and goes, call this guy. And it was your number. And he goes, call this guy. And it said Seano on it. And I called you. I'm over there at Herbert House. And I said, it's like asking for a sponsor. I didn't know how to ask. Do you have time? And you called me and you said, come on over, and you give me a time to come. And I ride a bike. I borrow a bike with a flat tire out of the garage at this place. And I ride over here and I have a meeting with you, and I'm sitting on this couch and you listen to my story. And I remember I cried here, and it was one of the first times that I cried, not out of so much self-pity, but I just realized I'm so out of moves. I don't know what to do. I'm willing to listen to anything. I'm just ready, and I don't want to blow it. But I don't know how not to blow it. And you said, you got a disease, right? And I said, yeah, I think so. And you go, and it's moving in for the kill, buddy. And that's when I cried. It was the first time that somebody without shame or blame just called it like it was. And you didn't say it in a way like, and here's what's going to happen to you. You just said, look, it's moving in for the kill. And you had a way about you that made me willing, to just listen. I'm trying to learn how to tell the truth, and I just don't want to carry baggage of untruth. And my wife is living over there. We really don't have any money, but we're footing the expense to live in sober living because our insurance doesn't pay for any of this. And my wife calls me and she says, Brad, I go, well, yeah. And I could tell she's crying and she's upset, and she's walking on eggshells trying to let me be sober and grow. And I'm going to meetings. And she said, I just had to walk out of Ralph's because none of the cards work. And you have to understand, my wife is like the mayor of the Palisades. She knows everybody. And if she goes to get a quart of milk, it takes her 45 minutes because she can't get out of the grocery store because everyone wants to chat her up. And she was the school nurse. And so it's always hi, Merritt, or hello, Mrs. McCoy. And so she's got a conveyor belt full of groceries. And All of a sudden, the debit card doesn't work, the credit cards don't work. And she has to basically do the walk of shame out of Ralph's because she can't pay for the groceries. And I'm trying to be sober. And she calls me in tears and says, Brad, we don't have any money. Are we going to be all right? And everything in me wants to go, yeah, we're going to be all right. And I have to say, I don't know. I think so. I hope so. But I'm at this point, by the way, I'm just about to start a new career because I have to come to the realization that commercial real estate is similar to what I did, but you're working for yourself. Like, it's all commission. There is no base salary. No one is hiring me. And I've got to go out and make a living.
Hunt buffalo.
And yeah. And by the way, my first year,
unbelievably competitive market.
Unbelievably competitive. There's everybody, 5 people want the same client. I believe that I can do it, I think, but I'm on your couch almost every single week. I'm scared to death. And I'm trying to do this. And I have really no money. I've got to hit this quickly. And in my first year, it should be noted, I made $50. And in that making $50, I was scared to death. I couldn't answer the phone. I couldn't answer the mail. And we would get to basic things in here. Like, you would tell me, okay, here's what we're going to do, Brad. You're just going to answer the phone. You don't let it go to voicemail. Before that way, your mind can't start running the tape on what that person you think they want to say. Basically, you were teaching me, I don't know shit. I need to just show up and I would be scared to go into a meeting, and you would say, let God go first. Here's what we're going to do. You're just going to let God go first. You taught me about being of service. You're going to use every opportunity to be of service. See how I can add something to this situation, not see what I can get out of it. Now, it's hard to do when you have no money, and every situation is also an opportunity to extract money from it. But what I wasn't yet, and I came to learn it because I didn't have any choice. I would go to meetings and I would sit on my hands because I was so uncomfortable, and there was no middle ground. Like, I was either going to stay sober or I was going to go out, hard. And I was learning things in here, like not just in AA, but in this room on this couch. Like, you'd be like, you got to know me so well, so fast. You'd be like, what's going on with you today, buddy? You're not even in your body right now. And I'd be like, it's going to sound dumb. You're like, no, hit me with it. What is it? I go, well, in a meeting when there's a timer and they say it's 2 minutes to share and the beeper starts going off and the person won't shut up. And I go, what do you do about that? And you go, oh, that's super easy. You know what the answer is, right? I go, no. And you go, it's none of your fucking business. Yeah, go to a different meeting. Cut to, I was about 5 years into this and I'm doing pretty well, but not that well. And you asked me the exact same question, like, what's going on with you today? You seem kind of out of jumpy and not in your body. In your body, learn to breathe. And I said, it's going to sound dumb, but I thought I'd be retired by the time I was 35. And with the financial wreckage I did, I'm going to die at my desk. And you go, oh, that's really easy. You know what the answer to that is, buddy, right? And I go, no. And you go, it's none of your business. Because if you take this whole thing and what we're about here, we're on a spiritual journey to bring as much love and light into situations as we can. It's not up to you how long you work, or if you work. You let God take care of that. We're in the show up business now. Like you say, having a triple black belt and showing up. And there were so many lessons that I learned in here about what I didn't know. Like, I always thought I knew what people wanted and what a situation needed. So I was fishing for a compliment from my wife. And I said, I was maybe 6 months sober and things in our relationship were sort of coming back together. And I said, can I ask you a question? She goes, yeah. I said, do you think that all the drinking I did gave me brain damage? And I'm really fishing for a compliment because I wanted to go, no, Brad, you're still so smart. And she goes, yeah, I think you probably did damage your brain. And I was so sad. I was like, oh man, and really? And she goes, but I like you better this way. She goes, because you used to just try to make me feel dumb and other people. And she goes, you just seem like, and I realized sometimes just showing up and being kind. And there was another thing that happened in there around the same time, Seano, and it connected to, my house burned down recently. And I was also sober just a few months. And And I wanted a parade. By then I'm doing everything right. By the way, I'd been fired by a sponsor. Like, I really was sober, and I got burned by people in AA. I had a sponsor for a minute that tried to borrow money from me. I mean, and I had that principles before personalities moment. And but now, I'm doing everything right, and my wife's nervous. She's nervous about me and where I am, and am I going to work? And I'm in here complaining on your couch. And you said, hey, let me ask you a question, which is always, I know I'm in trouble when you ask me that.
That's okay.
How long do you think you made Merritt feel unsafe? And I said it, and I knew exactly what you meant as soon as you asked the question, but I said a long time. And you said, maybe we should give her a little bit of time. And so when my house burned down, for whatever reason, that like when you gave me that book, Father Boyle's, tattoos of the heart, that tattooed on my heart, about giving her more time to let her feel safe. Because as somebody who never felt safe, I never saw it as my job to make people feel safe and to feel loved. I thought, you're supposed to make me feel safe, and that fire happened. I realized in that moment, like, my job is to make her and other people feel safe, see what I can bring to a situation to uplift them, and not see what I can extract from it. And something happened to me, and, I don't know why it happened and how it happened. Sometimes it takes tragedy to kind of test your sobriety, and just like having a child expands your capacity to love. Something has happened to me lately that, I wasn't looking for it, but it sort of expanded my capacity to show up for other people, to know that I'm okay. I think that the like earning $50 in a year and doing all that kind of stuff early in sobriety got me to a place where, I'm okay with me, because so much of the work that we did together and that I did in the first year or two of sobriety and continue to do is unlearning, what I'm not, was learning what I'm not what I am. I'm not a piece of shit. I'm okay, and for the first time in my life, I'm feeling like I know what it means to be a man, to be a husband, to be a father. You know this about, I have 2 kids now. And my daughter's almost, she'll be 27 next month. She's married, she's pregnant, she's got an awesome husband, and their life is off and going. It's beautiful. And my son, who's also just a beautiful, sweet soul, he got this thing bad when he was 17, and he almost didn't make it through high school. The opioids got him. And I was 5 years sober. I'm 12 and a half years sober now, but he really got it. And I was just sober enough. It's funny, in here, like, God doesn't give us more than we can handle. And just like they say in the book about, the beaches of Salerno and Alaska, like, people can thrive, when they're sober. But in this case, I was just sober enough that when I saw what was going on with him, and this was a lot of work with you as well, I had to let him go. I had to learn how to say goodbye to someone who's still alive, because I learned, because we talked about Al-Anon early in this, that I had to learn that I can't control his disease. And then until he surrenders and he's really ready, that I love this boy more than anything in the world. But I can't make him sober. I can't be sober for him. I learned, it's even the first time I was in rehab, somebody said to me, like, you can't be sober for those people. If that was what it took to get you sober, you wouldn't be here in the first place, And so this is his journey. I had to let him go. He had to live in his car for months. And, that feeling as a parent, that every parent knows, like, when you don't know whether the phone call is going to be the one that asks you to come and come and identify your own kid. but you also know that like the dollar you give him could be the dollar that kills him. And he knows that I'm sober and I'm ready when he's ready. And so he called us. We got that call that he was ready, and he went straight to detox and he went to rehab and he worked the steps and he had a couple good years of sobriety. I thought he had 5. I think
he lied like his old man.
Yeah, I was going to say, that hustle is very familiar to me. Yeah. And then he met a girl, he fell in love, and I think he's got that other program in here pretty good too. And I don't know why, people don't. It's so hard as a parent. I can't only imagine what my mom would think hearing me talk about how I felt as a little guy, because as a parent, you want your kids to feel safe and loved and lovable. And I don't believe he loves himself, and there's a question that you always ask. You used to always ask me every time. And it pops up on my phone every day. Like, where am I not trusting God in all my affairs? But more importantly, where does Brad not love himself today? And thankfully, there's not many of those areas I don't love myself today. And I think for him, like all I've ever wanted for him is to love himself and know he's enough. And but it's brutal as a parent, when you learn in here that sometimes to save your child, you got to let him go. And that, because they say in here, we end up in one of a few places, jails, institutions, or death. We either get it or, the other outcomes are not so good. They're bad. And so he's out there. He's out there doing his thing right now. And, we pray for him. We're ready when he is. And that is really what I learned too, is that, my job in everything in my life is to be as ready as I can be, whether it's to a newcomer who needs help, to my wife, to my colleagues, it's informed me on how to be a better partner, business partner, life partner, parent. And I had lunch with a friend the other day and I said to him, for the first time in my life, I actually feel like a man. Like what it feels like to be, and I don't mean that like in the Marlboro Man way. I mean, just to be handling my affairs and showing up for life and to be someone who is reliable and dependable. And I've learned so much in here, in the work that we've done and in these rooms. And it's really something, to be in a life, to actually want to be alive and to get to, be of service and have value for people.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Let's just end with this, okay? Where were you when the fire started?
I was in Idaho. So we have a house now
because of your hard work.
Yeah.
And being at your desk at 6 a.m.
Yeah. I'm on the Seano schedule. I get up at 4:30, and so we were at our home in Idaho, and it looked like the fires were getting pretty bad. But where our house is in the Palisades, I thought there's no way our house is going to burn. And in order for our house to burn, everything has to burn, and everything pretty much did burn. But I didn't know that my house had burned because the power went out, the cameras went off, and the next morning, so this would be Wednesday morning on the 8th, I got a call from a good buddy, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I was joking because I thought, "Nah, my house didn't burn." And I go, "Oh, I'm shopping for lots in the Palisades." I was just joking and making light of a situation, which is what I do. And he goes, "Stop joking around." And this is a guy who's pretty lighthearted who wouldn't say that. And I go, "Where are you?" And he goes, I'm in the Palisades." I go, "Oh, have you been by my house?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm in front of your house." And I go, "How is it?" And he just starts crying. And he goes, "It's gone." And I go, "My house is gone?" And he goes, "No, Brad, it's all gone. It's all gone." And my wife even, I don't think had totally processed it yet, because I looked up at her and she was in the kitchen and she's looking at me. She goes, our house? Like, she's asking me, like, "Have you asked about our house?" And I go, "It's gone." And she just falls in a pile on the floor crying. And, the thing that hurt me the most about that was watching her, go through the pain. I think that's when I had that moment. I'm like, I'm not gonna let for a minute. I'm not going to say something because all of our passports and our pink slips are in the house, and we thought to get them. And I just go, I'm not going to say anything unkind to her. She doesn't deserve it. She's been through enough, and this is going to be enough. And I thought I got to make her feel safe. And the thing for me was, this was my sober house. Like I moved into this house when I was a couple months sober. We rented it on a lease option, and we were able to buy it. But this was like this place, your place here is like an ashram, it's a special place. Simple. And nobody messes with it. I mean, this whole community knows this place has a special cloak around it. And that home for me was like that. Like it was my special, beautiful, sober place where, we raised our kids, and we've fought some battles there, in sobriety, and I watched my career be reborn into something that's beautiful that I'm super proud of. And so, now we're in the process of rebuilding.
And, Brad, what was it like when you guys walked onto the property for the first time?
We got to the base of Chautauqua, which is the road that leads up into the Palisades. And it's the minute we started seeing first, when you're at the very bottom, you think, this isn't so bad. How bad can it be? And when we got up to Sunset, where, the real fire, like the epicenter of where everything just got blown out was, we stepped on our lot. And by then my wife was bawling. We got to the National Guard. We didn't have a pass to get in. And they walked up, they were getting ready to turn us around, and they took one look at my wife. And the guy was so kind. And he said, listen, you're supposed to have a pass here, but I'm going to let you through. But do me a favor, get a pass, okay? And my wife was just trying to say thank you, through her tears. And we set foot on that, and it was just all gone. I mean, it was just and for her, it was like I'm a few clicks from having clothes again, and it was all the memories, and for her, all of her clothes and her community. And that's really the thing. Like we don't have a big house, but it was all of those. I mean, we've been there. We moved there in 1995 to the Palisades, and that community, those friends, you could just, it was like a tear in the fabric of it, And I remember sitting there that day, because I posted it on Instagram, because you had always said in here that no one can blow your light out without your permission. And I remember sitting there thinking that day, like no one can kill this community without our permission, No one can end our family. This was our family home. And no one can destroy our family without our permission. No one can take my sobriety without my permission. And no one can turn me into an asshole without my permission. And in that moment, I mean, as gut-wrenching as it was, and it's still, not easy, but I think Merritt and I together, made a decision that we don't give this fire permission to take away what we love about this,
Right on. Right on. And it's I've not seen self-pity out you. I've actually seen you more stronger, calmer, reflective, kinder than ever. Yeah, since this happened.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, really, huh?
And yeah, I mean, that's how I feel. And I just got to say this. I mean, not just because it's your show, but you know how I feel about you. And if you don't, you should hear it again. All the work that we did, and you not let me off easy. I was as ready as I needed to be, maybe not more so, but like that moment, you really helped me be ready for this.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brad. I love you.
Thanks
for being here.
Too.
This is really a beautiful day of healing for me with you.
Thank you.
All right. The Seano Show is a production of iHeart Podcasts, hosted by me, Seano McFarland, produced by Pod People and 28th Ave. Our lead producer is Keith Cornelick. Our executive producer is Lindsay Hoffman. Marketing lead is Ashley Weaver. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.